morning. You're watching Market Cafe on ET Now with me, Somit Sarkar, and my co-anchor Ankita Saxena. Firstly, let's look at how the US markets performed. Ankita, it was green in session in the second last trading day. What were the cues coming in?
Yes, absolutely, Somit. US markets rallied yesterday. They were led by the growth stocks. Now, yesterday, if you note, US unemployment data was supposed to come out, and the data came out and it signaled that the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes might be starting to dent the labor market strength in its bid to control inflation. Now, initial claims for state unemployment benefits rose 9,000 to a seasonally adjusted 2,25,000 for the week ended 24th of December. The labor market was in line with the median estimates among the economists polled by Reuters. So the numbers came in line with the estimates, and on the back of that, the markets rallied yesterday. The Dow Jones was up 345 points in the previous trading session before last. Dow had lost almost 300 points, so clearly there has been a recovery on Dow. It was up 1% in trade. The S&P 500 gained was up more than 1.5%, and the Nasdaq Composite added 264 points, or was up more than 2.5% in trade. Now, the European markets also closed higher. The Pan-European Stock 600 Index closed up 0.7%, having clawed back from the opening losses of around 0.5%. Now, most of the sectors and the major bourses were up, with tech stocks adding a good 2% to lead the gains. Now, DAX and CSE were both up by almost approximately 1% in trade, and FTSE closed up by 0.2% in trade. Now, that's how the global stock markets are rounding off a very tumultuous and difficult year, as governments and central banks really grapple with high inflation. Somit, how was crude last night?
Crude specifically, if you see, oil prices fell for the second straight day, but do remember it's a very volatile in trade, because right now what I'm seeing is crude is up again 1.5%. So it's trading in the range of around $82 to $84 per barrel mark. But the reason behind yesterday's fall was the uncertain demand outlook, as more countries are now restricting Chinese travelers now, and this is because of the rising COVID infections in the country. Now, earlier China's government had eased off their COVID restrictions, but given the fact that the number of infections in the country has been on a rise, Britain is reviewing whether to impose restriction on people arriving from China or not. And while other countries like the United States, Japan, India and Taiwan have already imposed testing on arrivals from China. So that's one of the reasons why crude has been volatile in trade. But when it comes to gas prices specifically, in US gas prices plunged, and this is despite the fact that the inventories in the country had come down. But the reason behind this fall could be on the back of warmer weather, some pickup in production that we have been seeing post the disruption caused by the holiday winter, and also because, as I mentioned, because of warmer weather. And when it comes to the European market, European gas prices were back to the pre-Ukraine war level. Now, mild winter weather in many parts of Europe, rising wind power generation and lower electricity consumption were dragging European natural gas prices and power prices also. Along with this, even if you see the gas storage level stands at around 83% of the capacity, which is above the 5-year average and has been unchanged compared to last week. So these are the two reasons why European gas prices specifically have been falling. And when it comes to Asia, the gas prices have inched marginally higher and are currently trading around $28.5 per MMBTU. And lastly, when it comes to gold, gold has edged higher on Thursday, helped by a dip in dollar index, and this is all post the unemployment data came in, and also because the US Treasury bond yields were largely stable. Now, do remember the spot gold is also heading for the quarterly gains of close to 9.5%, with prices up nearly $200 from that 2-year low that had hit in September 2022. So keep an eye out for gold. How it ends this quarter would be important to track.
Right, keeping an eye out on gold, and also keeping an eye out on all the events to watch out for in today. First up is very important. India's fiscal deficit data is going to come out today, and all the investors will be waiting and watching out for that data point. We also have IPO action. We have Elin Electronics listing on the bourses. Now, the stock market experts believe that the shares of the company may have a subdued or a flat debut today in the secondary market. Now, in the grey market, the share is available at a discount of 4%, so a rather muted start for Elin Electronics. We also have Saab Polymers IPO opening for subscription today, so keep an eye out on that. We also have some corporate action like Punjab and Sindh Bank will be having a board meeting to consider a fundraising, and we also have Welspun that will have a board meeting to consider a buyback. So these are the events to watch out for in today's session.
Moving on to some global news. Now, the number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits edged higher last week. Now, the claim figures have been choppy in the recent weeks but are still far away from the levels that economists think would be a red flag. Now, the US job market remains tight even as Federal Reserve works to cool demand for labor as part of its bid to lower inflation.
And South Korea's inflation stayed strong enough in December to justify another interest rate hikes in the new year. The reading comes after inflation slowed sharply in November, largely on base effect flagged by the Bank of Korea. Consumer prices advanced 5% for the year earlier, matching November's pace.
Well, a Chinese military plane came within 10 feet of a US Air Force aircraft in the contested South China Sea. Now, the US military said the plane had to take measures to avoid a collision in international airspace. A close encounter followed what the United States has called a recent trend of increasingly dangerous behavior by the Chinese military aircraft.
And the European Union's disease agency has said the screening of travelers from China for COVID-19 would be unjustified. Italy urged the rest of the European Union to follow its lead and ensure Chinese arrivals were tested. The US, Japan, Taiwan, and India also recently announced mandatory testing as China deals with a COVID surge.
Well, controversial online influencer Andrew Tate has been detained in Romania for forming an organized crime group. Now, the former kickboxer and reality TV star has been banned from a number of social media platforms for misogynist comments and hate speech. Earlier this week, he had a Twitter tussle with climate activist Greta Thunberg.
And Southwest Airlines vows to return to its normal schedule after mass cancellation of its flights created chaos for thousands of people. The company said it would resume operations with minimal disruptions from today. The carrier had cancelled more than 10,000 flights since a winter storm struck the US last week.
Also, Russia has fired more than 100 missiles into Ukraine earlier today, targeting Kyiv as well as Kharkiv. Close to half of Kyiv's population was left without power after a new wave of Russian strikes. According to Ukraine's Air Force, the attacks were from both sea and air-based cruise missiles that were fired from different directions. Now, the latest attacks come on the back of Kremlin's rejection of Ukrainian peace plan, insisting that Kyiv must accept Russia's annexation of the 4 Ukrainian regions.
And spotlight is on another Indian pharmaceutical company, this time for alleged faulty syrups exported to Uzbekistan and linked to deaths of 18 children who took the cough syrup manufactured by a Noida-based Marion Biotech. Now, clarifying on the issue, Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia said that the Indian Central Drug Standard Control Organization is already in talks with the National Drug Regulator of Uzbekistan. Now, he also added that a joint inspection of the Noida facility was carried out by the UP Drug Control and the CDSCO team as soon as the incident was brought to notice. Now, further action as appropriate would be initiated based on the inspection report.
Brazilian football legend Pele has died at the age of 82. He is credited with scoring a world record 1,281 goals during a 21-year career. He is the only player to win the World Cup 3 times, lifting the trophy in 1958, 1962 and 1970. Pele was named FIFA's Player of the Century in 2000.
Welcome back. You're watching Market Cafe. Let's quickly move on to some news flow from the domestic front. Now, the Reserve Bank of India has released its financial stability report. The report considers various scenarios and the possibilities of banks or NBFCs failing the test when under severe stress. In fact, 9 NBFCs fail in baseline stress scenario itself. Let me bring my colleague Ankur Mishra to break down the details for you.
Yes, sir, the gross NPAs of banks may rise to as much as 7.8% till September 2023, and that is based on financial stability report which has conducted macro stress test to ascertain what will be the situation 1 year from now. Currently, the GNPAs of the banks stood at 5% as on September 2023. Now, under the severe stress test scenario, the rise can be as much as 2.8%, that is to 7.8%. But under the medium stress test scenario, the GNPAs may increase to only 5.8%, that is only 80 basis point, while if you consider the baseline scenario, in that the GNPAs is likely to fall from current 5% to 4.9%. So the situation of Indian Bank is looking quite robust as per the report. Similarly, if you look at CRAR stress test, now under the severe stress test scenario, the CRAR of banks may fall to 13.1%, which is currently 14%. 14.8% as on September 2022, and if you consider the baseline scenario, this fall may not happen at all. In fact, it will increase to 14.9%. But this is not the same in case of NBFCs, where the macro stress tests indicate that capital adequacy ratio of sample which has been taken in NBFCs, 9 NBFCs may fail here, and the CRAR of NBFCs overall stood at 26%, and GNPAs has remained at 4%. Overall, Indian economy is doing well, and RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das has mentioned that regulators are doing their job as and when it is needed.
Well, thank you for all those details. Moving on to an exclusive, India is mulling to provide tariff reduction on over 65% of the items under the free trade agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council. Sources tell ET Now that India is likely to go for graded reduction of duties over coming years. Meghna Mittal joins us with more details on the same.
Right, India is going with great speed towards the FTAs with various countries. Now we know that India-Australia FTA is also coming into effect. As far as the FTA with GCC countries is concerned, we know it is a union of 6 countries in the Gulf region. What the sources are confirming to us, that India is mulling over giving tariff reductions for almost 65% of the tariff lines. That is what the sources are confirming to us. As far as for the other tariff lines are concerned, the government is considering giving graded reduction over coming years. That is what the plan is, what the sources are confirming. It will be very, very similar to the lines the FTA has been drafted between India and UAE, because seeing the response of India UAE, the government is enthused and the government wants to make it very, very similar on the lines of this particular FTA. Because if we see the India's exports to UAE, they have jumped by 13.5% to $15.39 billion. So that has been a good response post the FTA. So going on those lines, the government wants to give graded reduction to the GCC union, and it is aiming at wrapping up this FTA by June next year. That is also what the target is. Now, if this plan comes into effect, government is also expecting a huge jump in exports as far as with GCC is concerned, because we know that earlier also India has tried on 2 earlier occasions in 2006 and 2008 to finalize the FTA, but because of some reasons that FTA got stuck. So looking at that, the government wants to go with great speed this time, and it wants to draft it very, very similar to those that were that was the case with India UAE FTA.
And to some news from Dalal Street, where Royal Enfield is said to have made a strategic investment in Spanish electric mobility company called Stock Futures SL. Now, Eicher Motors will be buying a 10.3% stake in Stock Futures and will pay about 50 million euros for the same. The deal will pave the way for more R&D into the e-motorcycle segment.
Well, sticking with auto news, it's been a choppy year for the auto sector, but the players showed great resilience despite headwinds from supply challenges and weak rural demand trends. SUVs seem to be the big theme for the industry in 2022. Shrishti joins us to give us a detail of what happened and what's the way forward for the auto sector.
It was a dream run for select companies in the auto pack this year, leading the race in the sales, and the stock price were definitely M&M and TVS Motors. But holistically, if we say, as well as the auto index, then that index did pretty well for itself, up around 14.5% this year. But let's look at what actually shaped this sector. So this year clearly belonged to the SUVs. Many great launches like Scorpio and Grand Vitara Brezza happened this year, and this helped to take the market share of SUVs category to a whopping 42% versus just 26% back in 2019. And on the other hand, the bread certainly was not preferred much for the year gone by, because the hatchback share was seen to be at the lowest ever in the several decades. Now let's touch upon the EV sales. So this particular segment did touch its record high levels in terms of sales, but the deal of the year goes to M&M, which actually raised 1925 crores from BII at a valuation that was quite impressive, and also unveiled its future EV plans. But moving forward, let's also touch upon the two-wheeler segment and some of the headlines from this particular segment. So clearly, as we mentioned, that TVS Motors was one of the winners. So this actually took Hero MotoCorp in terms of market cap. Not just that, Hero MotoCorp also was seen to be losing its top spot in the two-wheeler sales in India with Honda motorcycle back in September month. But some of the launches that were actually made into the headlines, the Hero MotoCorp was seen to be foraying into EVs with the Vida launch, and Eicher Motors Hunter 350 was a big success. So the corporate announcements, Bajaj Auto made an announcement of a buyback that was the first time ever done by the company. So that was all about the two-wheeler segment and the auto space in 2022. But this will be interesting to watch out for coming 2023. What is the outlook ahead? So after 2 years of halt, Auto Expo is happening in 2023. That will be happening in January month itself, and multiple launches are lined up there, and most of the launches and unveiling are on the SUV side. So clearly and hopefully 2023 is also going to be an year of SUVs. Moving ahead, we are having a positive demand outlook for the CVs and the passenger vehicle segment specifically, and passenger vehicles are expected to end FY23 at a record high number. So we will be looking out for that. But nevertheless, 2022 was quite decent and a great run for the passenger vehicle segment specifically.
Well, as the new year is just around the corner, we have a roundup of how some of the celebrities from the industry are celebrating it. On this week's ET Now Recommends, Ankita got us a roundup of what the year was like for the celebs earlier and their investment mantras.
Well, as 2022 comes to a close, on ET Now Recommends special New Year segment, we bring to you your favorite influencers and your favorite startup founders to tell you where they are spending their New Year's, their New Year resolution, the biggest life lessons, their money mantra, and what's on their wish list for the coming year.
I will be spending my New Year tucked inside a really nice warm blanket, sleeping. That's what I've been doing for the last several New Years.
New Year's this year would be in Mumbai.
I'm honestly spending it in my beautiful city with my beautiful mother, because I feel this year's been all about travel and I've been away from family.
I am spending New Year's in my favorite city. I'm going to Paris next week.
I'm going to be spending my New Year's at home this year. My closest friends are coming over, and we will be sitting at home.
A southern part of Indonesia for a wellness retreat with my colleagues for a week.
My New Year's resolution is to learn to chill a little bit more. This year was all about change and growth, and I'm consciously learning how to take a step back because this is the year I turn 30, so I need some balance.
I've realized that resolutions don't work. So I'm not going to have one big resolution. I'm just going to have small things that I keep, small goals that I work towards throughout the year.
I'm not a very big resolution person. I'm more of a consistent habits kind of person. But if I were to say something, then it would be mentor more.
Don't take things for granted. I think COVID has taught everybody that. And be more holistic in my outlook towards life.
Picking stocks. I am not an expert. I still tried to do that in the US market. It fell disastrously on me.
My YouTube channel wasn't doing too well early this year, and I was putting too much pressure on myself. So I'm gonna learn to take that mental pressure off. Therapy this year helped a lot.
I think it's very important to trust myself and my gut, which I didn't do at certain points in 2022. And I hope that I change that in 2023.
I think in 2022 I said yes to a lot of things, and I realized I didn't have enough time to do the things that I loved. So in 2023 I'm going to reclaim that time.
I would like to invest a little more in stocks because I think I missed out on that on 2022.
Biggest life lesson that I have learned over the years is that joy of giving is much more than joy of receiving.
The biggest lesson in life is that we're all going to die. So at the end of life, I think love is what matters the most.
That good things take time. So you have to be patient.
Money mantra is drawn from Warren Buffett. As he says, no one in the world wants to get rich slowly. And my money mantra is to get rich slowly.
Oh, my money mantra is that keep your ability to earn higher than your needs.
My money mantra is first earn it and then constantly figure out how to earn more. Because when you have money, you will figure out how to save it.
My money mantra is that save it.
My money mantra is to not think too much about money. Do stuff that you love and do it well, and money will come.
Do not borrow, do not lever, always be diversified.
Ask the stupid questions to the most experienced people. So never be shy about asking finance related questions.
I really wish that I knew that it was never too early to start. I always thought investment is something that you do when you become much older.
20s, I wish someone had told me to invest more in what I'm passionate about. Because when you have the opportunity to work on something you're passionate about,
Investing horizons are long. You're not trying to time what is happening in the next week or month or year.
Probably want to travel as much as I've traveled this year. Though
I think I would really wish for at least one or two of my Shark Tank investments to do phenomenally well.
Those were all the celebrities and social media influencers and startup founders for you, making their wish list known for 2023. With that, it's time for us to step into a short break. You don't go anywhere. There's lots more news coming up on the other side. Welcome back. Here watching Market Cafe. Before we begin with the rest of the news flow, let's quickly mark the Asian markets now. Asian markets have taken a cue from Wall Street rebound, and all markets are up, barring Kospi. Kospi is down a little more than 1%, almost 2% actually in trade. Now Nikkei is up. Nikkei is in the green, up 0.2%. Shanghai is up 0.6%, and if you look at the SGX Nifty on your screens, it's up 0.3%. So they're all up by a marginal gain, largely flat, but in the green. As we can see, the US futures have inched lower. This is probably hinting towards a rather muted start for the Indian markets as well.
Well, thank you for all those details, but how did India manage to walk the tightrope when it comes to oil diplomacy? And has cheaper Russian oil helped the government coffers? In a candid conversation with ET Now's Nikunj Dalmia, Oil and Petroleum Minister Hardeep Singh Puri answers some of those questions to put the record straight. Listen into that.
It would be useful to acknowledge that high oil prices will further exacerbate the current situation and drive the global economy into the big R.
Yes.
And once that happens, again, it's a self-fulfilling promise.
Yeah.
You have inflation, you have high oil prices, you go into recession. You go into recession, in any case, the demand drops.
Yes.
So you're back to square one. So aren't you better off to calibrate the extent of energy or the extent of crude that you produce and release into the market? You've got some form of restrictions, Venezuela, Iran, and you've got this price cap issue with the Russian. I think we reach a situation, you have to be very careful on how you navigate through this.
But on oil diplomacy, Minister Puri, I think it's been a victory for us. Just to put it on record, how much of the oil in India is now coming from Russia, and do you see that number increasing in 2023?
First of all, you don't determine how much you're going to buy from X or Y. The purchasing is done by the private sector and the OMCs according to price. They've got term arrangements, they've got spot, etc. I started by telling you we consume about 5 million barrels a day. For a long time, prior to 31st March 2022, our largest suppliers were, and in many ways continue to be, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, maybe somebody else, roughly at the level of 800, 900,000 barrels a day. Russia ended up the previous fiscal year ending 31st March with 0.2%.
Okay.
Today, Russia is, I think last month was the largest supplier. In between they did, Iraq overtook them. Our oil companies, or for matter any entity in the world, will buy from wherever they're getting at the cheapest rate. So in other words, what you call success, I don't share that. I think we have, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will. I think we've reached a point of maturity where we'll play the market card, because we are one of the defined consumers, and if you have to buy 5 million barrels a day, obviously we will buy from someone who is giving it to us on better terms.
Do watch out for the Hardeep Puri exclusive. But for now, we'll go across to my colleague Lisa, who has all the stocks that will remain in focus in today's trade. Lisa, tell us what are the stocks that we need to watch out for?
Well, good morning. A bunch of news coming in from Reliance Industries. Their subsidiary Reliance Consumer Products has acquired around 51% controlling stake in Lotus Chocolate, and Reliance Consumer will also make an open offer to Lotus Chocolate to acquire around 26% stake. Reliance Consumer Products will buy Lotus shares at rupees 113 per share, and that amounts to around 74 crore. The next news is on the announcement of the two 5G services in Indore and Bhopal, so making Reliance Jio the only operator in MP to launch 5G services in these two cities. DLF has received a notice issued by the New Okla Industrial Development for the payment of rupees 234 crore. Devyani International unsecured creditors have approved the proposed scheme of amalgamation amongst Devyani Airport Private Limited, Devyani Food Street Private Limited and Devyani International Limited with requisite maturity. AG Infra has received a LOA from NHAI for construction of Greenfield project in Haryana and the project cost is around 744 crore. IRB Infra SPV under private InvIT arm has allotted NCDs of rupees 700 crore to the eligible investors, and they will use these proceeds to refinance their existing debt. Also, the lower interest cost of around 8.9% will bring the annual cost savings of the interest to around 10 crore. City Union Bank has opened 19 branches and their total branch network stands at 753. Supreme Petrochem has completed the EPS, that is the expandable polystyrene production facility capacity and commissioning trials at Chennai plant. After this, the effective production capacity of EPS has increased from existing 24,000 TPA to 33,000 TPA. Swan Energy's NCLT has approved the plan to acquire the Reliance Naval and Engineering for Swan Energy. Welspun India has also entered into an arrangement for supply of renewable energy under captive structure from Clean Max Thanos, and the company's Vapi factory will acquire renewable energy from the proposed project of CTPL. Well, on the IPO action, we have Aline Electronics will be listing on NSE and BSE, and analyst expects that there'll be a muted debut for this company and making it the last stock listing on for 2022 this year. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for all those details. Now, it's been a turbulent year for the equity markets amid inflation plus recession concerns and an overall risk-averse sentiment. But Indian markets are still on track to end the calendar year 2022 with positive returns. Vamakshi joins us to give us all those details of how the year has gone by for the Indian equity markets.
Well, what a year has it been for the Indian markets. We saw benchmark indices scale record highs. In fact, the World Bank believes that with GDP expected to grow at 6.9% in FY23, India may remain one of the fastest growing major economies. Now, given strong domestic fundamentals amid global macro headwinds, it comes as no surprise that India emerged as the best performing market in 2022. Now, this winning streak was largely supported by banks, metals, FMCG and auto. PSU banks particularly managed to significantly outperform other sectoral indices. On the flip side, the two big winners of the COVID era, IT and pharma, were in for trouble in 2022, with the IT index declining after gaining consecutively for the last 5 years. It is also interesting to see how some of India's biggest business houses have performed. Now, given the move in Adani Group stocks this year, the group saw the largest jump in market cap. This was followed by Reliance. The Tata Group stocks were the biggest wealth wipers of 2022. Moving on, now let's get a bit more stock specific and look at some of the star performers of 2022. BLS International tops this list, posting the biggest yearly gain in its history. Adani Group stocks and some public sector undertakings also posted a good rally. On the other hand, IT names like Brightcom Group, Tanla Platforms, Zensar Tech stood among the duds of D Street this year. New age tech companies like Paytm were also some of the major wealth eroders this time around. When we look back at the year gone by, Nifty posted a 300 points plus rally 12 times with the largest single day gain of 510 points on Feb 15. On the other hand, there have been another 15 instances where the index has crashed at least 300 points in a day. In fact, February 24th was the worst day for Nifty when it crashed nearly 815 points after Russia invaded Ukraine. It is interesting to note that as the US Fed began rate hikes, foreign investors flee the Indian markets. But they made a comeback in the last 2 months of the year. While they took shelter in defenses like healthcare and FMCG, they pulled out funds from investments in software and financial services. Additionally, India was one of the brightest spots in an underwhelming year for IPOs globally. The number of deals increased by 3% by volume, but the proceeds declined by nearly 56%. Nevertheless, India saw one of its biggest ever listings with LIC. In fact, Adani Wilmar was the best performing IPO of 2022. So that was the tale of 2022. But where are markets headed in 2023? Most brokerages are highlighting that the superior growth outlook has already been factored in the valuations. In fact, Goldman Sachs believes that Indian equities are less likely to outperform for the third successive year. The consensus target from all these brokerages imply just a 5% upside in 2023. However, in sector themes, D Street is betting big on capex revival and credit growth. But will the markets march that way? Only time will tell.
Well, thank you, Amakshi, for all that exhaustive details about 2022. Now, moving on, cement companies in a trade yesterday were very weak, and the reason behind this could be this channel check report, which is suggesting that the prices on a pan-India basis for the month of December has dropped by nearly 1% on a month-on-month basis. Now, for the quarter, if you see the brokerage is suggesting that the prices have increased by only 2.5%, and the major price drop in the month of December was coming in East and the southern region, while in other regions the prices have largely remained stable. On the volume side, the brokerage is saying that the industry volumes are likely to have been flat to marginally positive on a YOY and on a month-on-month basis in December. And when it comes to the full quarter, that is the third quarter of FY23, the volumes might have increased by around 7 to 8% on a YOY basis. But this is also on the back of a favorable base and strong infra push by the government. So not big improvement in the volume side and on the pricing side seen for the cement companies. And lastly, the most important thing that the brokerage is saying here is that the cement companies are attempting to take a price hike of around 10 to 20 rupees per bag across regions in the month of January. But it will be a wait and watch. We'll have to wait and watch and see how these price hikes are absorbed in the system. Now, do remember in past also the cement companies have tried to take several price hikes, but they have not been able to pass on this to consumers. So we'll have to wait and watch how this pans out for the cement companies in trade.
Well, with that, we are completely out of time on this show. But Market Cafe will see you in the new year. From Soumit, I and the whole team that put this show together, wishing all the viewers a very happy and a prosperous new year. See you again.